Well, certainly from those that get their news via the WAPO and CNN. And on that score, you literally can't help but make a scriptural reference. The truth is finally coming out whether the prince of this world likes it or not. And as Yeshua was sending out his taught ones, his disciples, he gave them some telling advice and said, I'm sending you out as sheep in the midst of wolves, therefore be wise as serpents and harmless as doves, and beware of men too, because they are really nasty you-know-whats. And added, you'll be hated by all for my name's sake, but he who endures to the end will be saved. But a whole lot of nasty things are going to happen, and I think we're certainly seeing a lot of that today too. He concluded it by saying, do not fear these folks, for, quote, there is nothing hidden which will not be revealed, nor has anything been kept secret that will not come to light. And I'm going to suggest that it represents a theme that I think we're going to see more and more of as the wheels begin to come off the American economy. There's no more hiding it. People start to realize just how badly they've been lied to, if not outright killed already. And whether the waste stream and the regime in Washington likes it or not, they begin to realize, oh yeah, they really have managed to destroy America. So now, to paraphrase Morpheus,
as planned,
we really are beginning to see just how deep the rabbit hole goes. So let's start here with a case in point, courtesy of the Gateway Pundit and Julian Conradson, entitled Surprised and Concerned. Poison Control has issued a nationwide toxic warning about, well, what should have been warned about a long, long time ago, before the COVID-19 84 pandemic and bioweapon attack was allowed to mature and kill quite so many tens or hundreds of millions of people. Anyway, this warning is about the COVID-19 so-called rapid antigen test.
This is going up on Rumble.
A poisonous liquid substance that they say is commonly used in pest control. Which fits, doesn't it? Big Brother certainly wants to control all those pesky little useless eaters out there. For months, says Conradson, there have been many people sounding the alarm over the at-home COVID-19 rapid test, saying that the kits include toxic substances that pose health risks at a minimum, and maybe they're acquiring DNA for the communist Chinese puppet masters and all kinds of other things as well. Anyway, these are things that have been widely condemned by the establishment and its captive press as, what, a wild, even, conspiracy theory. Well, just like with most everything else these days, by now you've probably heard the joke. What's the difference between a conspiracy theory and a fact? About 6 months. If it's election rigging, of course, or murder on the most massive scale in human history, which still hasn't come out, it looks like the difference between conspiracy theory and fact there is closer to 2 years. Which turns out to be pretty much the theme for a lot we're going to talk about today. Anyway, now even public health officials can't ignore the dangers posed by these so-called test kits. Last month, the Gateway Pundit reported that Ohio and Texas had issued warnings about seeing an increase in reports related to sodium azide poisoning, a chemical found in the test kits, after the Biden Fuhrer promised to give out 500 million of these things to Americans. The poisonous substance, sodium azide, has a, quote, high acute toxicity and can be fatal to humans in cases of overexposure. According to Stanford Medical, the presence of the toxic substance was apparently only found by poison control researchers after a winter wave of Omicron, which saw too many Americans, it would seem, testing at home with these kits, and many of them falling victim. The main symptoms of exposure to sodium azide, by the way, include lowered blood pressure, headache, hypothermia, and in the case of serious overexposure, convulsions, and even death. According to WHIO-TV Channel 7, drug and poison control centers across the country experienced a large increase in cases involving sodium azide, which prompted the Ohio Poison Control first to issue their warning. The poison is located in the extraction tube inside the kits, and the substance is colorless, tasteless, and odorless. Dr. Sheila Gortmoller, a member of the Ohio Poison Control Center and the toxicologist for Cincinnati's Children's Hospital, who spoke with WHIO-7 about the agency's decision to issue the nationwide warning, explained that at least 54 other poison control centers in America have also seen a similar upswing in sodium azide poisonings of late, saying that her colleagues were surprised and concerned that such a highly toxic substance is actually being put in these test kits. Meanwhile, those of us who understand the real motives here are wondering why it took them so long to figure that out. We continue that theme first with Jim Hoft and the Gateway Pundit, who said, After a year and a half of media blackouts and denials, ABC, NBC, and CNN have all decided to report honestly, well, at least as close as they ever get, on the Hunter Biden, and here we go, laptop from hell. You probably remember that back in the year of COVID hysteria, 2020, the fake waste-stream news media all unanimously reported that Hunter Biden's laptop was Russian propaganda. And a whole bunch of so-called top intelligence officials, read career liars, signed a letter, which got published, of course, saying that the laptop and everything about it was Russian disinformation. See now, creepy quid pro Joe Biden, and that's no excuse, lied about his son's laptop during a debate, and the media has lied about it literally every single time it's come up, which is far less than it ought to have, in order to save the criminal CCP plant in the White House. It was a ridiculous lie, said Jim Hoft, and anyone with any curiosity knew it. And as Tyler Durden, writing for Zero Hedge, summarizes it, as regular readers of that page know, the New York Post was excommunicated from socialist media shortly before the 2020 U.S. election by Big Brother, Big Tech partners for reporting on the shady international business dealings by the Biden crime family, particularly in Ukraine and China, all of which was contained within a trove of emails, text messages, photographs, and financial documents.
Yeah, nothing will happen.
Infamous
of
laptop
course.
from hell that Hunter Biden abandoned at the Delaware computer
Because
shop
Americans
in
too
April of
frickin'
2019.
lazy.
And here they provide a whole list of headlines to refresh our memories. 1. Hunter Biden, ex-biz associate, was livid over $5 million side deal with the Chinese, according to texts. Number 2, why is the FBI's top child porn lawyer involved in the Hunter Biden laptop case? Hey, how about the Hunter Biden laptop linked to FBI money laundering investigation? Hunter Biden witness moved from prison cell after exposing influence peddling operation. Chinese money launderer called James Biden after FBI arrest, trying to reach Hunter. Here's one. Sperry exposed the complete history of Hunter Biden's crony-connected jobs. And finally, the latest cache of emails detailed how Hunter Biden earned millions in China for introductions. It helps to have friends in really, really high places. Or better still, Daddy. And covering for the big guy of the Biden crime family to help him win, or at least steal, the 2020 election, people like Representative Adam Schiff for Brains of California insisted it was Russian propaganda.
Hey, this is Mark Call.
Were smeared.
So everybody knows.
Say it with me, folks. Conspiracy theorists.
Mark
But then the dam
Call.
started to break. 2 weeks ago, the New York Times confirmed that the laptop actually existed, and oh yeah, in spite of our lies before, and they didn't put it that way, as you can imagine, it really is legit. And they confirmed several previously reported aspects of the story, including correspondence between the evil Hunter and his business partner, Devon Archer, both of whom served, or at least got their payoffs, for being on the board of the Ukrainian energy giant Burisma. You know, the one where Daddy Biden's on tape actually threatening to withhold $1 billion quid pro quo bribe, or U.S. guaranteed loan, in order to shut down the investigation, to get the prosecutor in Ukraine fired. Anybody else remember this?
I had gotten a commitment from Poroshenko. They would take action against the state prosecutor, and they didn't. I said, I'm telling you, you're not getting $1 billion. I said, you're not getting $1 billion. I'm going to be leaving here. And I think it was, 6 hours? I said, I'm leaving in 6 hours. If the prosecutor's not fired, you're not getting the money. Oh, son of a got fired. And they put in place someone who was solid at the time.
Someone who could be trusted to keep all of this under wraps, well, at least for long enough to get me ensconced in the Oval Office. Oh, and while I'm at it, I guess this too bears repeating. Remember one of the biggest lies in all of presidential debating history? And there have been a lot of them.
Vice President Biden, there have been questions about the work your son has done in China and
Here we go.
for a Ukrainian energy company when you were vice president. In retrospect, was anything about those relationships inappropriate or unethical?
Nothing was unethical. Here's what the deal. With regard to Ukraine, we had this whole question about whether or not, because he was on the board, I later learned of Burisma, a company, that somehow I had done something wrong. Yet every single solitary person, when he was going through his impeachment, testifying under oath who worked for him, said, I did my job impeccably. I carried out
no
US
wonder
policy.
we're in Ukraine,
Not one
right?
single
Or we're going to get
solitary
into the
thing without
Ukraine.
lying. Not a single thing. Number one. Number two, The guy who got in trouble in Ukraine was this guy trying to bribe the Ukrainian government to say something negative about me, which they would not do and did not do because it never, ever, ever happened. My son has not made money in terms of this thing about, what are you talking about, China.
Bullshit!
I have not had it. The only guy made money from China is this guy. He's the only one. Nobody else has made money from China.
President Trump, let me ask my question to you.
But could I just one thing?
Very quickly.
His son didn't have a job for a long time, was sadly no longer in the military service. I won't get into that. And he didn't have a job. As soon as he became vice president, Burisma, not the best reputation in the world. I hear they paid him $183,000 a month. Listen to this. $183, and they gave him a $3 million upfront payment.
All right.
And he had no energy.
I'm going to let the Vice President respond to that quickly, and then I need to get to a question to you. Very
No
quickly.
basis for that. Everybody investigated that. No one said anything he did was wrong in Ukraine.
No, they wouldn't dare. Anybody who did knows what's going to happen to them. They got completely excommunicated from the web. They lost their business. Hell, they may have lost more than that. What a disgusting lie, folks. Now it's been revealed, and the fact that it's coming out now is raising more than a few eyebrows. Why has the waste stream been lying about this for years? But now, suddenly,
because they're their fourth branch of the government.
And that includes the WAPO and CNN, with the Post confirming yet more details of the laptop contents, while CNN ran a blistering segment reporting that the federal investigation into Hunter is, quote, heating up. And the WAPO is even reporting on Hunter's, quote, multi-million-dollar deals with a Chinese energy company. Well, at least, says Tyler Durden, an honest journalist like Glenn Greenwald, who's among those that have been pointing out the hypocrisy and the cover-up for quite a while, isn't about to let the waste stream get away with this latest U-turn unscathed. Just fucking amazing, he writes. Now the WAPO, 10 days after the NYT, admits that the contents of the Hunter Biden laptop are genuine and is using them in their reporting. Yet, not one, and he emphasizes it, corrupt outlet that spread the CIA's pre-election lie that it was all Russian disinformation has retracted.
Brennan and Clapper need to be prosecuted.
A lot is just not talked about enough. The CIA, big tech, and corporate media all conspired in the weeks before the election.
What about the FBI, though?
Lie in order to manipulate that election. And oh, guess what, folks? They covered up the rigging, too. And you know, blankety-blanking, well, they're not about to admit that. These emails, says Glenn Greenwald, were all forged by Russia, or so they said. Now, they're ignoring the proof.
Right.
And here he asks the question that inquiring minds everywhere are starting to say, yeah, let's figure it out. Other than that they genuinely see their role as lying for those noble ends, you know, to destroy the United States economy and the Republic and replace it with a communist regime, of course, what could possibly justify their refusal to retract that CIA lie that the Biden archive was Russian disinformation, or at least acknowledge the proof? Looks like maybe the jig is up. With no small amount of trepidation, because these kinds
Nothing
of
will
stories have
happen
been wrong
though,
so many
because
times
Americans
before,
are too lazy
unique among conspiracy
to hold their
theories that way. You know,
government accountable.
Eventually, the truth might actually come out,
story.
And there might be justice for those that have been involved in destroying the entire republic, going back not just months or years, but decades at this point. Yeah, I know. Don't hold your breath. But anyway, here's what Mike Adams at Natural News says, citing new intel from credible U.S. military sources. Although he admits, too, it's always difficult to sort out fact from fiction, this is a credible source, previous information from which has generally proven to be accurate. They've filtered all of this, of course, to remove any OPSEC details, but here are the bombshell developments underway right now within the deepest layers of the Pentagon and the criminally evil CCP-run Biden regime. I put some of those words in there. First, he says, inside the Pentagon and even the intelligence community, there is a growing consensus that the Biden regime has outlived their usefulness, putting America on a path of complete, total economic destruction that even the bad guys realize must be stopped from within or else. Thus, the number of people inside, he suggests, the CIA, FBI, DHS, DOD, and other illegal, unconstitutional, anti-republic TLAs are now beginning to switch hats. They're taking off their black hat, and they're putting on the white hat. And the number is rapidly expanding. You've heard the phrase before, folks. It certainly fits here. Rats deserting a sinking ship. What I'm told, says Adams, is that many of these people are, as you probably have already figured out, corrupt, greedy bastards, evil to the core. But there are limits even to what they will tolerate. They're opposed, for example, to the pedophiles running the Biden regime and fully aware of the child trafficking allegations and evidence that's been found, among other things, on that Hunter Biden laptop from hell. In addition, they obviously have a pretty good racket going, and they don't want the U.S. dollar to completely collapse, and they fear
it's
their
going to collapse
along with it. So maybe that means they need to stop Biden from completely destroying the U.S. dollar, and with it, America's once-free economic system. In other words, even some of those who voted for Biden and are part of the corruption realize that if they don't stop the madness, they too will be destroyed along with America when the entire thing collapses into total ruin. So perhaps it's mostly out of a sense of self-preservation, and in some cases, although I doubt this personally, folks, human decency, he says, they're turning against the cabal and hoping to preserve some of their own positions of power in the process. So here's where the plot thickens, and I'll at least follow Adam's chain of logic for a minute here. I'm told, he writes, that indictment papers for Hillary Clinton, Barack Hussein Obama, the big guy's big guy, Hunter Biden and Joe Biden are already circulating within the intelligence-sick community. All the players are fully aware of the serious crimes of official corruption that have been committed by these people and those who have propped them up and covered up for them, spanning several decades. The intelligence community influencers are attempting to prepare
Unfortunately, nothing will happen.
Senile, obviously beyond redemption, Joe Biden from power and publicly expose the Biden crime family while still maintaining some degree of credibility for the socialists that have engineered this whole thing, i.e. the Democrats and their deep state, truly fascist to the core controllers in the midterm
World
elections.
Economic Forum.
If this seems, and I agree, it does, like an impossible task to you, he says, most of the deep state experts also agree that there's simply no way to expose all of this, although it basically already has been, without ripping the credibility of the Democrats and those who run them, and the control media, of course, completely to shreds, which is the main reason why there's an internal power struggle going on, a pushback against this strategy. And that's also, he says, and this I don't doubt, folks, why there is a contingent within the deep state that's seeking to get rid of Joe Biden by any means necessary. And arguably at the top of the list might be a false flag operation that would allow him to be taken out, assassinated, or whatever, then given a hero's funeral. And here your host interjects, oh yeah, and preferably blame those that they've already blamed for the insurrection on January 6th and are seeking to demonize by calling them things like domestic terrorists and white supremacists and so on and so forth. But one way or another, he suggests the attempt might be to restore Joe Biden through some kind of legacy into what he's not, much like they did for the traitor John McCain, who was part of the Russia collusion attempt against Trump. And see, they still haven't exposed all of his criminality. But certainly on the false flag front, Mike Adams points out that there's another factor in all this weighing heavily on the various three-letter unconstitutional agencies, FBI, CIA, DHS, ETC.
NSA.
Biden's new deal with Iran. Real fake bucks for real terrorists is going to flood Iran with billions of dollars in freshly printed new U.S. cash that will enable them to fully fund
you just sit on your ass and pay your taxes.
Will be unleashed into Western Europe. That's a virtual certainty by pretending to be Ukrainian refugees seeking protection in the West. Some of them, of course, will also be able to sneak into the USA across the open southern border, likely pretending to be South American. But once they're in and they get their bus tickets and they get shipped wherever it is the Big Brother regime wants them, then they can easily acquire the weapons and explosives they need. Hey, see, they can get stuff that you peon Americans aren't allowed to carry out their murderous task of causing chaos and fear all across America. Guess who will get blamed, and guess who will take the credit before whatever it is that they unleash. Effectively, Joe Biden, he says, is now the world's #1 funding source for radical terrorism, not only in the Middle East, but worldwide. And high-level officials inside
Fast and Furious, there was no accountability on that one.
That the senile ones' criminal actions are going to place themselves and their families in danger, given that some of the terrorism targets in the USA
Ruby Ridge, Waco,
include radical
come on, folks, wake the hell up,
government
man.
installations of some kind. Specifically, the Pentagon's been mentioned, although it's not clear how any terrorist could threaten the Pentagon building or grounds, given the level of security. Well, at least not without inside help. Adams says he tends to believe the terrorists will prefer soft targets, such as nightclubs, heavily attended sporting events, shopping malls, etc., where they can accrue very high casualties due to the great density of lots of people in a small space. a la Las Vegas, or that gay nightclub in Orlando. Now, at this point, folks, your host has to inject an observation or two as well. Certainly, they intend to blame guns. They need an excuse to take all of those away from the American peons before they realize that the famine that they've already got started is going to take so many of them out, and they're bound to be angry about it. So, a word to the wise, avoid major concentrations of people in gun-free killing zones. You're a sitting duck. Yep. But they also need to point out that with more and more people dropping dead of, oops, no, well, you certainly can't write or tweet about that. You'll get banned. Dying suddenly of unnamed causes, when in fact we know darn well what the cause is. They're going to need cover for millions of excess deaths. So, let's make it an exercise for the listener. Can you think of anything that might cause huge numbers of unexplained excess cancers suddenly coming out of the woodwork or out of remission? Well, except, of course, for the booster shot of that which must not be named. I know. How about radiation? And guess what? Most people don't have a Geiger counter, so all they got to do is tell you that there's radiation, and that's what caused you or Uncle Fred's cancer, or your nephew Billy, who dropped dead on a soccer field. And who are you to say otherwise? So imagine if those open southern border terrorists, who'll be called domestic extremists...
Y'all got to find this guy, Mark Call. He's here out of Salem
dirty bombs
at 2 o'clock.
And anybody and everybody in the mass
good radio show
thereafter, well, that's what done it. And the beauty? They won't even be able to prove otherwise, any more than you can show that it was the mRNA poison poke that had anything at all to do with it. But whatever form it takes, it's verified, he suggests, that the U.S. intelligence community, for what it's worth, believes that Biden's actions in funding Iran will unleash a new wave of actual terrorism, at least in Western Europe, and almost certainly in America as well. And no, he says, we're not talking about the fake staged FBI events like the theatrical kidnapping of Michigan Governor Whitmer that was all but planned and executed by FBI informants and insiders. This time, it's real, unbounded violence carried out by well-funded terrorist groups, effectively funneling megabucks of Biden's U.S. cash into various terrorism operations. And there is a date certain at the end of this, folks. They have to rush to remove Biden in order to salvage the midterms, or at least salvage the fraud that's almost certain to occur surrounding the midterms. And if it's obvious that there's nobody that would vote for anything associated with the
fucked because Americans won't stand up in mass.
That becomes more difficult, albeit not impossible, as we've seen.
They want to keep their heads up their ass.
And we certainly don't want to forget Plan A, which is still at least more or less on track, escalating the Ukraine conflict into a full-out, shooting on all fronts world war with Russia, so that the regime can declare a wartime emergency and cancel those pesky midterm elections while they rule a totalitarian police state and arrest anyone and everyone who dissents, calling them, Russian disinformation agents. Bottom line, concludes Adams, and here your host agrees wholeheartedly, we're watching an internal, at least partly secret civil war unfolding day by day. And certainly, one way or another, you can expect all sorts of fireworks from this action, as various factions of the deep state, the intelligence community, and those who've been fighting them for so long anyway, try to expose what's going on the one hand, while they wage false flags, assassinations, blackmail, and stage child trafficking stings on the other. After all, these are some of the most vicious, immoral, and your host will put it this way, outright Satanistic people on the planet. And now they're releasing their worst weapons against one another. And let me add one more time, if they kill a few million Americans in the process, hey, it's just collateral damage, and that was what they wanted to do all along anyway. As just one case in point, suggests Adams, did you hear that story about Representative Madison Cawthorn, who revealed what went on in Washington District of Criminals last week in an effort to set up blackmail of elected representatives and other officials?
They're all compromised.
Moving to Washington, D.C., he said he's been invited to outright orgies with politicians, and he saw powerful people doing what he called key bumps of cocaine right in front of him, all while the waste-stream media was collecting scandalous stories used to blackmail people and keep them silent.
And the NSA, CIA, FBI.
He just hadn't been paying attention. Welcome to the red pill, Madison. Anyway, astonished at the levels of sexual perversion that happen routinely in the nation's capital. Some of us folks have seen...
And Epstein didn't kill himself.
This has been going on for a long time. Since we had a known rapist in the White House, and the waste-stream media was covering up names like Juanita Broderick, Kathleen Willey, and Paula Jones.
No shit.
Among, as it turns out, many others.
Most people don't know who they are.
The stains on a blue dress were probably child's play.
Because they're too fucking lazy.
Literal child's play that's been happening in that den of sin and iniquity ever since. So yeah, expect some real fireworks before things turn hot this summer.
Total shithole. Anyway, that's Mark Call, you guys. If you can find him on your local radio station somewhere, good program. He's on from 2 to 4. I just wanted to cover a little bit of that and throw my comments in there. I listen to him every Sunday. So anyway, take care, guys, and have a good week.
Have you noticed that as everything around you seems to decline, one thing still grows? It is the power of your rulers. None of their plans and directives have solved your problems or made your life better. The only result has been their increased control over you at the cost of your freedom. Do you know why? You gave them the power.